Hi, everyone. Nice to see you and hope you all found us on Facebook or YouTube. Welcome. Welcome to tonight's webinar where we're launching the Kangaroos Alive Walks and Talks program. Firstly, we acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation on whose land we're broadcasting from tonight and pay our respect to their elders past and present. And we're delighted to have with us tonight Dr. Anthony McKnight, a senior Yuin man, and we'd like to particularly pay respects to the elders past and present from the Yuin Nation and the late Uncle Max, who we've worked with for many years campaigning for kangaroos both here in Australia and internationally. My name is Kate CLERE and I'm co-founder of Kangaroos Alive, and I'll moderate this evening. And we're joined by our Walks and Talks partners tonight, back to country with Dr. Anthony McKnight and ecologist Craig Thomson from Save Kangaroos on the Mornington Peninsula, and Mick McIntyre, co-founder of Kangaroos Alive. We're so proud to launch the Kangaroos Alive Walks and Talks program, which has come from our belief in the intrinsic value of kangaroos who have coexisted here for 20 million years, and the acknowledgement that we have so much to learn from all the kangaroo species. Kangaroos are one of the top 3 tourist attractions for visitors coming to Australia, and they're key in our multi-million tourism campaigns. In fact, in the last large figures from tourism coming into Australia pre-COVID, 2018, 2019, Australia generated $60.8 billion in direct tourism GDP. And recent data from 2021 shows that the gross value of production of the kangaroo industry is only down at 25 million. So what Kangaroos Alive are keen to do is support the shift from kangaroo killing to kangaroo watching. And we're launching tonight our program that offers communities and individuals across Australia a wide range of materials to launch their own Kangaroo Walk and Talk program. And we'll begin by hearing from our 3 speakers, and we'll have time at the end for a Q&A. So please add your questions in the comments and I'll pick them up as I go along and chat to them. So welcome all the people that are coming here tonight and coming on this program in the next while. So firstly, we're going to have a look at the case study of Australia turning from whalers to whale watchers with Mick McIntyre. Mick is an award-winning filmmaker with a passion for wildlife protection. His film, Kangaroo Alive Hate Story, invigorated the movement to stop the killing of whales. His film, What to Do About Whales, led to Mick working for over 20 years on whale conservation issues. He was involved in the development of whale watching across Australia and the Pacific Islands. Mick's films have been considered for the Academy Awards and have been positively reviewed in the New York Times, the LA Times, Variety, Hollywood Reporter, BBC, and Le Monde. Welcome, Mick. Thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Kate, for that introduction, and good evening, everybody. Thanks for coming out on a cold winter's night down here in the Southern Hemisphere. My talk tonight is a case study on how Australia went from being whalers to whale watchers. Kate gave you guys a little bit of a background about how it happened for us. In the late 90s, we produced this film, What to Do About Whales, and that had a profound impact on us because we filmed in 4 different countries. We filmed in 2 countries that are killing whales, that being Japan and Iceland, and 2 countries that protect whales, that being New Zealand and the US. And immersing ourselves in those 4 cultures really did have a life-changing impact on us. So much so, as you've heard, we spent the next 15, 20 years working to protect whales, which brings me to tonight's presentation. Whaling, Australia was a proud whaling nation. In fact, the first fleet back in 1788, when the white settlers came to Australia, I think 3 out of the 6 boats were whaling ships, and they were promised if they took the convicts across, they could return back to the Europe with full of whale oil. So that's how much history there is for white settlement for whaling. And it basically whaling was all over the coast of Australia. There were whaling stations all over Australia. And it got to the point by the 1960s that whaling had become a tourist attraction. And here's a photo of Byron Bay in 1962. And it's really interesting to see that if how whaling was considered a tourist attraction, and how people condone the killing of whales, and what that does to our current thinking of how people treat kangaroos. But basically, the new 1970s brought a new world. People like Jacques Cousteau were the first people to go underwater and bring us the first images of these majestic giants of the sea. And this brought a whole new appreciation, a whole new understanding of these magnificent animals. It was the first time that we really saw how graceful they are. It was the first time that we saw them as being highly social and highly sentient beings. And this new appreciation led to a new movement, the Save the Whales movement. And because what we have to understand is that by the 1970s, Australia was still whaling. And in 1978, when the campaign really ramped up in Albany, Western Australia, a group of very dedicated campaigners across Australia converged on Albany in Western Australia. And this campaign to shut down Australia's last whaling station was led to the creation of Greenpeace Australia. So it was a huge moment in Australian history as far as conservation outcomes. What happened in 1978 was the Australian federal government called a royal commission into whaling. And this was unprecedented when you consider that Australia was a proud whaling nation. So for the Prime Minister, Malcolm Fraser, to call a royal commission was a huge turning point in Australia's history. And I include this slide of the press release, which was very profound, because as you'll see, the Prime Minister released the report, and the Royal Commission's principal conclusion was that Australia should cease whaling. And not only cease whaling, but Australia should pursue a policy of opposition to whaling worldwide. I mean, just have a think about that. We went from a proud whaling nation to a Royal Commission saying that we should not only stop whaling, but we should take the cause to the world. And the other really significant thing about this Royal Commission in 1978 was that it discussed the ethics of whaling. And that was unprecedented for conservation, particularly wildlife conservation, that a Royal Commission would consider ethics of whether we should be killing whales. And again, I think that's very relevant to today. So Australia has precedence in this change. And what came from this Royal Commission was that indeed Albany did shut down its whaling. And in 1980, the Whale Protection Act was written. And then that was replaced in 1999 by the EPPC, or the Environment Protection Biodiversity Conservation Act. And the reason that's relevant to today is that this year, or last year and this year, the Act is being reviewed. And again, that has a lot of significance for kangaroos, because that's one thing that Kangaroos Alive are working on, to improve this Conservation Act, that it's better for kangaroos, because clearly it's good for whales. Australia's waters are now a whale sanctuary. So again, this amazing change from being a whaling nation to the entire coastline of Australia being a whale sanctuary. And then what came in the late 1980s, early 90s was the birth of whale watching. And this was, again, significant to what we're talking about tonight, because this new appreciation of the whales led to people wanting to see them. And Australia quickly became a world leader in whale watching. And here are some of the locations all around the coastline of Australia. And as a Tasmanian, I'm very annoyed that the Tasmanian locations aren't listed there. And apologies to my family and friends in Tassie. But you can see that just how many spots that are now commercially whale watching. And what's really interesting is that whale watching began by fishermen and dive operators who were sporadically taking people out. It wasn't an organized venture at all, but people again, what's really significant about this is that people laughed at these dive operators, and they laughed at these fishermen when they were told, when they told the people that people were willing to part with money to go out and see whales. They were basically ridiculed. People thought that was never going to happen. And we now, in 2009, a study was done by the International Fund for Animal Welfare, which was then reviewed in 2017. It's now a $2 billion industry a year. So it went from people laughing at these operators to being an incredible part of people's economies. We were then, with our work, it was interesting at the same time in the 90s that people were still having a choice on what to do with their whales. And in the Pacific Islands, there was a country, the Kingdom of Tonga, that had a proud whaling history, whaling of their humpback whales that migrate there every winter. And the King of Tonga had a choice to make in the 1990s. Would they take advantage of a whaling culture, or would they embrace this new wonderful new industry called whale watching? So we helped run the first ever whale watching workshop in Tonga, and basically this resulted in people being trained to go whale watching. And I think a lot of you will know now that Tonga is now one of the jewels of the whale watching crown, if you like, around the world. It really is a primary spot to go whale watching. We commissioned a study which was done by the Centre for Tourism Studies in New Zealand, Dr. Mark Orams, who, again, we wanted to highlight what it was worth to the people of Tonga if they allowed that humpback whale to live. And what the study from Massey University came up with was that each humpback whale could bring in close to $1 million during its 50-year lifetime. And we presented this to the royal family as a way of highlighting what a whale alive is worth versus what you would get for cutting it up and selling it to countries like Japan. So again, this was a very effective way of showing that whales were worth much more alive than they are dead. So we can draw a lot of comparisons to what we are currently doing with kangaroos to what we used to do with whales. And I think that we now hold the whale in Australia in high regard. It is, not only economically significant, but it's culturally significant. And it has, as we heard, it has intrinsic value to the people of Australia. And one of our intentions of this kangaroo watching program is that we can draw on our experience from what we did with whales and what we learnt from whaling through to whale watching. And we do believe that we can go from kangaroo killing to kangaroo watching. And it's my great pleasure to be part of this program presentation tonight, launching the Kangaroo Walks and Talks. Thank you.
Thanks, Mick. Hey, can we just ask a question? Sarah's got a question. How did it happen that people stopped whaling? Like, where did the pressure come from, and how even was the Royal Commission put into action?
Well, basically, you could draw the conclusion very similar to how we had a New South Wales parliamentary inquiry into kangaroos. It was a lot of lobbying of politicians. It really is a great campaign story in the regards to how groups like Project Jonah and, as I said, Greenpeace Australia, they mobilised. There were people mobilising, and it was a combination of people lobbying Canberra. And it was also a combination of direct action. Some of the stories of getting in front of the boats in Albany, a lot of that is not known, but there were Zodiacs that were, there were men and women willing to put themselves in front of the whaling ships in Albany. And eventually the public pressure got so immense that, the government had no choice but to at least question it. But we do congratulate Malcolm Fraser, who, interestingly enough, is a conservative Liberal. So it was a conservative government that brought this Royal Commission into effect. I'm not sure they realised how profound the recommendations would be. But it was one of Australia's great environmental campaign success stories.
One of the things you talked about that not many animals in Australia or anywhere is talked about is that ethical reason of people realising that it wasn't ethically okay to slowly harpoon whales anymore and let them die slow, painful deaths. Do you think there's any comparison we can make there that we can turn? Do you think it was stronger now that we've got whale watching, and that's worth a lot of money? Or do you think the ethical thing around the welfare of whales was stronger, or are they both equally as powerful, do you think?
Well, no doubt that was the big surprise out of the Royal Commission in 1978 that Sidney Frost, who chaired the Royal Commission, he allowed the discussion on the ethics, and that no doubt that was one of the profound changes to Australian way of thinking, that we were allowed, if you like, we had permission, if you like, to discuss the ethics of whether we should be treating this magnificent icon like that. Very similar to the commercial kangaroo industry in Australia, that we are talking about an industry that is brutal, has very slow times to death. So yes, we can draw similarities to what's going on with kangaroos at the moment, and that's why we thought it relevant to talk about in tonight's presentation, because yes, there is precedent for us to be talking about the ethics of how we should be treating our icons. And I put whales and kangaroos in that same sentence because they are clearly two of our biggest wildlife icons in Australia.
Yeah. Just finally, make a quick question about Tonga. You trained people in Tonga from really just the grassroots, wasn't it? It was just like one or two people put their hands up, and just talk a little bit about, like, how long ago was that?
That was in the 90s, and yeah, look, it was all very organic at the start, because, as I said, we still had people not believing. We had people not believing that it was ever going to happen, it was ever going to work, but we could see that there was enough of a shift, and we could see that people were starting to catch on that it was a wonderful wildlife experience, and that we have this safari mentality in the plains of Africa. And I guess people started to realise that we could have that same experience on a whale watching boat, and that's why we also think that that safari experience we can translate here to Australia. That in regards to getting out and seeing kangaroos in the wild. So it was very organic at the start, but it quickly grew when tourists started to catch on.
Well, those are fantastic stories, and I'm sure we'll sort of hear more. And I know that the people working behind this Walks and Talks program are looking forward to doing more things like we did in Tonga, where we really supported groups right from the grassroots up to help set up these kangaroo watching programs across Australia. And that's sort of part of tonight's program. So thanks so much, Mick. It's been nice to chat to you. I'm going to take you off and your program off. So tonight, I'm really excited now. Two things that are central to the Walks and Talks program: connection to country and the groundbreaking Yuin Declaration. I'm delighted to introduce you to, just going to put Macca up. I'm delighted to introduce you to Anthony McKnight, who is an Awabakal, Gomeroi and Yuin man. He's a senior lecturer at the University of Wollongong with the Indigenous Strategy Unit as curriculum transformation lead. Anthony is one of a number of senior men for Back to Country, whose mission is to heal country and people through providing opportunities for Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal people to learn about the Yuin culture. Anthony's worked closely with the late Uncle Max over many years, who is a key advocate for kangaroos and the author of the Kangaroo Yuin Declaration. Hey, Macca, nice to see you this evening.
Hi, how are we all? Thank you, Kat.
That's great. There's lots of people coming on and asking questions and things. And I'm sure that we're just thrilled that Back to Country are partnering with us on this program. This is a key part of the program to really link, millions of years of kangaroos being on this country, 80,000 years of Indigenous people being on this country and just learn what the Yuin people know about connecting with country and connecting to kangaroos. And tell us, Maka, at the start, tell us about the Back to Country organisation.
Firstly, before I do that, I'd just really like to acknowledge Uncle Max. He was such a great man that was my teacher, and a number of fellas and women as well, that he kind of taught over a long period of time in that old way of teaching. And I'm really appreciative of what he's taught us. And I know he had a good relationship with yourself too, Kate, and Mick and others. And talking about Uncle Max, it was Uncle Max's dream to set up an organisation, and he called it Back to Country, so we can take people back to country. That was the simplicity of how Uncle Max worked. Simply put, to simply keep it, as he would always say. So it was about helping people to go back to country, to care for country. That simple obligation that Aboriginal people had been holding for thousands and thousands of years is to take care. And in a way, how one kind of saw Back to Country was giving people, whether you're Aboriginal or non-Aboriginal, permission to take care of the place we called home, to bring people back to country. So Back to Country does a range of things of cultural camps, cultural workshops, education programs, health. Some of the previous members were involved in running, working stuff with juvenile justice. So there's a whole range of things that Back to Country has been doing over a long time. But the key concept for Back to Country is, how do we take care of country? How do we, help our totemic animal of the kangaroo? How do we look after our creeks and our rivers? So it's just inviting people to be involved with us to do that. Whether it's Back to Country or other Aboriginal people in other areas, to learn about country, the stories that country hold, because country is our knowledge holder, it's our teacher. So inviting people to take care of all those gifts that country provide us, whether it's air, water, or the kangaroo. Yeah.
It was amazing to work with Uncle Max, and just can feel his spirit with us here tonight, as he was so passionate about the kangaroos, and we just spoken about that with him many times, and he really taught us just to learn to be with the kangaroos and to watch them and to learn from them. And one time he called us down and he said, come down here, I want to have a chat, we're going to do a declaration. He had this really strong, this was really not so long ago, he really wanted to make a Yuin declaration for kangaroos. And we were looking at declarations at the time, and the United Nations declarations, and like the sort of power of his vision of what a declaration was. And I'm going to put up the Yuin declaration now of what came from those early discussions. And can you talk us through this declaration a little bit, and what we can learn from it and what it's about?
I was going to say something else, but another story just popped into my head. I think Uncle Max went over to China, to kind of stop the trade of kangaroos to the Chinese, and they met with the high declaration, with the high delegation from China about stopping the trade of kangaroos, because he was all about taking care of country. And the kangaroo is such a significant totem, not just for Aboriginal people, but as in the declaration, for non-Aboriginal people too. It's part of our coat of arms, and maybe we're the only country in the world that doesn't take care of their coat of arms, their totem, the kangaroo and the emu. But it's that invitation that Unc gave. But when they're in China, Unc got a little kind of, as he called them, the spiritual emails. And when he was sitting there having that yarn with them, he said, "Oh, you've got your pandas. They're endangered species. You revere them. You're learning how to respect them and take care of them. What happened if a group of Aboriginal people wanted to trade the panda and have that?" Or he put it in, not in those exact words, but he kind of put that across. If we wanted to have a trade relationship with the panda, and then the Chinese declaration got it. They just went, "Oh, is that how you value the kangaroo?" And Unc just went, "Yeah, it's us, you know." And I remember when my son was 4 and my youngest son was 4, and I was trying to teach him what a totem meant. And after I spoke to him, he went, "Oh, it's probably way over his head. What have I done?" And about 2 weeks later, we're at the dinner table, and he's sitting there, and he went, "Dad, I can't eat your totem, hey?" And I went, "Yeah, that's right." He said, "Because I'll be eating you." Coming from a 4-year-old. And I thought that's the best way, in a way, I've ever heard anyone describe a totem, coming from a 4-year-old. Because we're one and the same. We're the one and the same spirit. And Unc's, through his declaration, is inviting people who call Australia home to have that same feeling, that oneness with the country that provides us with water, the air we breathe, the food we eat, everything that we need comes through country. And Buru is part of country. It keeps this, as the declaration says, it keeps its own songlines going. And with colonisation, we've reduced the chances for the kangaroos to hold their law, to maintain their songlines, to follow those dreaming tracks. So what happened to Aboriginal people is similar to the kangaroo. They were stopped on holding their obligations. And what people don't understand, that which Unc is trying to explain in the declaration, is that the roos with their soft padded feet hitting the ground, maintaining those songlines, isn't just for the kangaroo. It's for us.
Right.
It's for humans as well. So the kangaroos holding those responsibilities of maintaining their songlines is beneficial for them, of course, because it's their obligation, their responsibility, but it helps us in our survival, helps us in our lively day-to-day lives because of that oneness that Unc is trying to get through here.
Right.
So the declaration is basically letting people know in Australia how much and significant this gentle and beautiful creature is. He uses the word elegant in the declaration and everything, but it's a statesman. It takes care of things without violence. And that's where Aboriginal people, we learnt from country on how to behave.
Yeah.
And if you look at our history, we weren't a warring culture. We had fights, like every people. We had fights, disagreements, people were hurt, but it was not a warring culture because we observed the animals like Buru, the kangaroo. It wasn't an all-out war. It was a couple of males, it was a bit of a skirmish. So people kind of get there and go, oh, and you look at the early documentation that Aboriginal people must be some kind of weak because we weren't warring culture.
Yeah.
But our animals taught us, and the birds and everything taught us how to take care of country, not to fight against it. So in a way, that's what that declaration is about, that we take on that obligation of taking care of such a statesman that taught us so much.
I sort of feel like the articles are really, each of them is very strong. We could actually have the whole hour on just the articles, and I really recommend that people go to the website of Kangaroos Alive and download the Yuin Declaration, and there's whole programs that we're happy to help with for that. But just so we can keep going in tonight's, and I'll just take that off just so we can see you more, Macca. So when people are on country, Macca, and they're interested in sort of being out in the wild with kangaroos, what can we learn? What's the sort of experience? Sort of, I know it's really without giving you like 5 minutes to talk, but what can you learn when you're with kangaroos on country?
Well, if country's our teacher,
yeah,
in the tours, you give time during the tours for people just to sit and observe and see what the kangaroo is teaching you. Each individual we could all be observing the same situation, the same ruse, the same group, but people might get different interpretations because the teaching is for something within you on that spiritual level that you need and require. And as a group, you share what the kangaroo taught you. What did that roo teach you? Oh, kangaroos can hop backwards. Oh, sometimes I might have to step back. It's not always going forwards. You know? So it's simple to me. How I taught a lot of us was giving us the gift of observation, so that looking, listening, and seeing are the three Yuin principles of teaching and learning. So looking or watching, listening, and then observing or seeing. So what are the gifts? And that's people I just like to think that are listening. What are the gifts that kangaroo give us? Some of those gifts are shared in the declaration. Maintaining the song lines for not just for them as us is one of those gifts. Food, our food was our medicine. It was done in ritual and respect and in ceremony. And it was done to maintain the population. So observing what the joeys are doing, what the mothers are doing, what the males are doing. What happens if the dominant male has been killed by a shooter? Look at the chaos that occurs from that. Or when the dominant female, I even hate that word dominant.
Right, yeah.
Because it's not appropriate. Could be more like the elder kangaroo, or whatever it is that we can come up with language. But those things might be taught to us while observing the kangaroo. So I don't know, can't tell you exactly, but the gift is that Unc would often share, to look, listen, and see what is that creature teaching you what you need in that now right then. Whether it's to take care of the kangaroo, that could be the focus. Okay, let's observe the kangaroo for a while and see what it's showing us, how we can take care of it. So, and then just maybe having a yarning circle, and if you've got Aboriginal people, whether it's back to country or an Aboriginal people that you've met and keen and love the kangaroo as well, other organisations or individuals, then sit down and have a yarn. What did we learn? What did we learn in that 20 minutes of just sitting and observing the kangaroo? Someone might just simply say, oh, I've got to learn how to observe. I kept on being distracted and looking at my phone.
Yeah.
But it's just that, maybe the care that the mothers take for their young, and the gentleness that elder kangaroo, or whatever you want to call them, has for the females around them. There's time when I observe them, they're very caring. And make sure that the young kangaroos behave themselves. The young male kangaroos behave themselves. So what can that teach us as humans around helping our young men behave themselves? So there's so much that we can learn.
I feel like it would be great as part of the training program to just be able to do that as leaders and tour guides, so that feeling of, as you said, looking, listening, and seeing is really embedded in the program, so that can be passed on as a wonderful gift to people who come along and join us in watching kangaroos on this continent. Yeah. Hey, thanks, Macca. There's so much more that we could hear from you and learn from you, but I just really want to thank you and Back to Country for partnering with us on this program. And I know that your partnership is really going to kind of embed itself in the very heart, or already is embedding itself in the very heart of what we hope to do across the nation. So thanks for coming with us tonight. And there's going to be a few Q&A at the end, people. So if you've got some questions for Mac or any of the speakers, write them in the comments and I'll find them. And but thanks so much, Macca. And I will introduce Craig. I'm going to let you go. Cheers. Thank you. So now I'm really, it's a lot to go on tonight, people. So stay with. So now I'm very excited to introduce Craig Thomson, who has been working with us, and he's involved with the details of the program. Craig's an ecologist, wildlife ecosystems retention and restoration guy. He's been running our pilot program for walks and talks on the Mornington Peninsula. And Craig has made the program a huge success with Outdoors Victoria, incorporating a walk and talk as a field trip in their nature steward program. And Craig has since gained his tour guide license. And it's so great to have you with us tonight, Craig. And your partnership, of course, is key to this whole launch and this whole program. So thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Kate. And also, while I got you, I'd also like to acknowledge the Bunurong and Bunurong people on the lands where I am tonight as well.
Excellent. Thank you. So great to have us coming in from around the country on all these different lands. So tell us, Craig, why were you interested personally in setting up the Kangaroo Walks and Talk program in your area?
So we had a mob of about 600 kangaroos that were trapped on a private property with wildlife exclusion fencing. Unfortunately, the property management put up the exclusion fencing when the kangaroos were on the property and not off the property, and hence a large number got trapped there. And the manager wanted to get these animals all shot. Thanks to Animals Australia, they took out some legal action, and those kangaroos aren't going to be shot now. The manager has surrendered his permit. But in getting all this publicity to try and save these kangaroos, we started to hear a lot of the same old questions again. And really, it has kind of been a struggle and very frustrating to get into arguments with people who don't even know the basic biology about kangaroos. So kind of thinking we've got to do something different to change people's mind. And to me, I think the first thing that I kind of came up with was the best thing is to actually, as Macca has just been talking about, is to get out there and get people to watch, learn, look and see with these animals.
Yeah, fantastic. So how did you start your program and what location did you choose for it?
So do you want to bring up the picture of Arthur's Seat, Kate?
Oh, yeah. Data stream.
Yeah, obviously, I think a picture can say 1,000 words. I mean, really, we've got a beautiful kangaroo there up on Arthur's Seat. And then obviously looking across Port Phillip Bay across to the city of Melbourne. So yeah, it is really a fantastic site just for the aesthetics. But I guess more practically as well, there's two places on the Mornington Peninsula where you can see kangaroos in the park system. One is Arthur's Seat State Park. The other is the Mornington National Park, Greens Bush. Now, Arthur's Seat's actually closer to the bay and it's closer to the urban areas. As where I guess Greens Bush is a bit more out in the rural areas, and there's only one road in there and one road out there. And obviously with our walks and talks, we do them either first thing in the morning. We do, it's either breakfast with the kangaroos or sunrise with the kangaroos or sunset with the kangaroos. So the last thing that we want is to have people driving on the roads where kangaroos are going to be on the side of the roads. And Arthur's Seat was obviously a road that you come onto up to Sea Winds, where there's the chances of people hitting a kangaroo on the side of the road are going to be a lot less. So yeah, that's the other practical reason why we've chosen that site.
What a beautiful site. Look at that. Absolutely magnificent. Of course, the important thing there you're saying is that in some ways people have to be able to come there easily. And, like whale watching, it's come out of towns or places where people already are in a way, or just inviting people to be in that area. So what a magnificent place you're next to. And I'm sure that lots of people listening might be able to think of somewhere in their town or a place close by that's accessible. That seems to be a key to the whole thing.
Absolutely.
And so what are some of the, so practically you have dawn or dusk tours. And what are some of the notable things you've learnt from your first few tours? Like, has it been easy plain sailing, or, is there things you learn each time?
We're always kind of learning different things. Actually, just this past weekend, I actually did a walk and talk with the Victorian Kangaroo Alliance over at Wonga Park up in Mount Lofty. And we had a wildlife rescuer come along, and she'd actually been alerted to the fact that there are actually an injured kangaroo with a injured paw. So we're actually able to locate that kangaroo and actually do a welfare check on it. And coincidentally enough, there was actually a second kangaroo that had a bad ear. Its ear couldn't sit up properly, but again, it was in very good condition and it was alert and it was doing everything that it should be. So we weren't able to not have to bring that in, but it was really kind of handy in learning that there are other things to do. So obviously, this past weekend was a welfare check while having a talk and getting people to connect with kangaroos in a place that I haven't been before. So I also got to learn a lot of issues that those kangaroos are facing over there. Like coming back to the Mornington Peninsula, I think really the biggest issue I guess we've kind of had was signage. I think we kind of turn up in our hoodies and our t-shirts kind of saying who we are, but really we kind of needed flags to kind of identify who we are and where to meet exactly, a pinpoint location for people to come out, which has kind of worked really well. And again, at the last meeting or last walk and talk, I didn't put up the flag because I didn't think that many people were coming, and I knew the people who were coming, but coincidentally somebody else had turned up who I didn't know who was coming. So yeah, it was a really good lesson that always have that flag up so people know where to come. And further to that, there are other people who might be at the park at the time that we're doing the walk and talk. They see the flag go up and then they want to join us as well.
Right, yeah. So it's quite spontaneous in that way, a little bit different to whale watching where you sort of get on a boat quite often, mostly for the experience. This is really in our park system already, which has got its amazing benefits because people are already there. And I know, as we said in the beginning, Australians, but our international guests as well, are really keen to see kangaroos, particularly in the wild. So, it's amazing to be able to, in fact, when we were making the kangaroo movie, we often heard from international guests that they couldn't find kangaroo watching in the wild in Australia, and they were really disappointed because that's where they want to see them, in the wild, and that's where you get to connect to country and connect to kangaroos. So it's great that you've been there and other tourists have just been there wanting to do that. And as when you have the people, do you talk to them? Do they listen? How does that work? You start the program and...
Yeah, so generally we'd start the program with a welcome to country followed by the Yuin declaration. And then we'd like to engage them with our talk. So as we'll kind of I said earlier, trying to communicate with people about basic biology of kangaroos. And that's kind of how we start off with is, we just ask people the basic questions about how much do kangaroos weigh, how long do they live, when do they give birth, just simple questions like that. And you'd be surprised at how very few people know these simple questions or the answers to these simple questions.
All right.
And then we kind of continue the conversation in trying to dispel some of the myths that everybody seems to be an expert in, that there's too many kangaroos, they eat all the grass, they breed like rabbits. So then we go through and we kind of debunk myths like that, and we ask them what are other kind of misconceptions that they've heard about. So once we've done that, we then actually go off and find the kangaroos and sit down. Sometimes it's really easy because the kangaroos are actually coming right up behind us in the picnic grounds, and we don't have to move very far at all.
Mm-hmm. Oh, fantastic. And how do the participants respond?
They love it. I mean, we haven't had any complaints yet. And I think the real kind of takeaway is really the kangaroos are the star of the shows. In particular, the joeys. I mean, everyone loves the joeys. And the males too. And again, it's the males are always trying to mate with the females. That seem to get a lot of the attention. Yeah. There was this one of the walks. There was this really kind of endearing big males who kind of came up, and he was positioning himself behind the female kangaroo, and he was actually stroking her tail, trying to get her permission. It kind of was a real kind of smash hit, really, with the participants.
Right.
But like Maka was talking before, like sitting down watching them, and it's really interesting. I think the connection that people have with it is because it's familiar to them. They're actually kind of seeing kangaroos behave the same way that they behave with their own family and their own friends, and particularly with, I guess, the mums and the joeys. Sometimes you can see that the mother's getting frustrated with their joeys. Sometimes you can see that they're really doting, and you can just see the mums can all really kind of feel and know what those kangaroos are experiencing with their joeys. It is really endearing to watch.
Yeah, fabulous. I know that somehow the joeys also with the whales, the same thing. It's the babies that are weird. They're like us. They're more alike than unlike, as we used to say with the whales. Yeah.
Absolutely. There was this one kind of joey. It was really, really funny. Way too big to be in mum's pouch, but was very persistent. But mum wasn't having a bar of it.
Yeah, that's great. So, Craig, we've got lots of things to talk about. And as I mentioned earlier, that we might spend a bit more time on doing actual trainings like we did with the whale watching and things. But I just wanted to talk what you and Kelda and the Kangaroos Alive team with input from Back to Country and other people around the country have been creating. We've created a web page on Kangaroos Alive. I'll add the URL to the chat. Can you just talk us through how we're going to support people and what are some of the things that they can get from the Walks and Talks kits that we've been making?
So part one, I guess the organizer is obviously for the people who want to do the walks and talks. It kind of gives you a brief overview of what to expect, some of the ideas to plan, like what's happening in your local neighborhood, what species are in your local neighborhood, and then, some basic facts about some of the kangaroos, obviously, that we have here. Number two is the behavior cards. The behavior cards just kind of talk, obviously, as it says, about kangaroos' different behaviors. And we've actually kind of found this to be really, really handy by printing them out and laminating them and handing them over to the people who come along. It's a really great way of getting people to participate in the conversation because, they can be a bit shy or feel a bit awkward in opening up. But having those cards there are fantastic and it really does get people into it. The other thing is that we've had a lot of homeschoolers come about and they've actually kind of gone off with that material and then used it for projects as well, which has been fantastic. Yes, public liability, I think, has been a really important one for us. just to cover ourselves, and be able to get the appropriate permissions to do what we actually do. And we wouldn't have been able to do that without you guys. So we are really, really grateful for that. Part 5, direction signs, as we're kind of talking before. Really, really important to have those signs up so people know where to come and find you. 6, social media. Obviously Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Put up your event on those social pages, and put the times and the places within those flyers. There is a space provided in it for you to do that. And I think that's the same with 7 and 7B.
I think we should. I mean, people can go and download all of these things, and if there are any questions, Kelda, whose contact's at the bottom of that, and I'll put her contact up on the chat group now. You can totally talk to us, ask us questions, and invite us to your area if you want more training. And we're really happy to help in any way we can. I'm just going to thanks so much, Craig, for everything actually, but talking with us this evening particularly. And what we're going to do now is bring Mick Macca. I see that Mick's not there, but we will bring him on. I'll wait till he gets back to bring him up. He's coming. I just wanted to ask, anyone, please, if you've got questions, let us know in the, you're on mute, Mick, if you want to ask us anything. But I've got a question first up is, Macca, how can people get in touch? What's a good way to get in touch with their local Indigenous mob, just to see what's a good way for people to sort of build their own programs with local people? Is there anything you could recommend?
You asked a tricky question. Each community is different.
Of course.
Basically, you just start with, there are Aboriginal organisations that you can approach, but often they get approached and they're very sceptical at first because they get a lot of different people coming in. But the best way is probably through your own relationships with the Aboriginal people of finding out who's appropriate, who's the person to talk to in that area. There's elders groups that you could go to. There's there's a whole range of Aboriginal people working in different things, but it can, again, just be careful on how you approach, just that respectful approach. There's an Aboriginal tourism group. There's a whole range of different organisations. So it's not quite a simple answer. With my students, basically, it just takes 2 or 3 years often.
Right. Yeah.
Time to build that trust in those relationships, or the right person to come along.
Yeah. I think it's important for so much of our aspects and lives, and to be connecting and learning from one another. And this is just part of that story in a way, is just stepping out and reaching out and starting to have those conversations, I think, in your local area, whether it's sort of through your local council or, through connections that you've personally got. But I think
talk to Kate, get on to Kate, and Kate can ring me and I can see if there's a back to country member in that area.
Cool.
There's another option.
Yeah. Sarah, she just has a quick question. If I design a brochure for my walk and talk, can you print it possibly? So what we're going to do, Sarah, is deal with each group individually, because I think as they start around the country, so talk to Sarah, obviously, to Kelda at least directly about that. But I think that there is, we have done a walk and talk brochure on the thing, and you can help us design it with your logo on it or whatever. We'll help you individually with those sort of things. You're welcome just to download it as it is and use it, or we can change it up for your area. I think, as Mick said, with kangaroo, with whale watching, it really is a a grassroots thing, and you'll do it differently in your area. What will be strongest in your area will help you lead, your group and the way you do it. So I think let us help you where we can, and also create it for your area. I know that with whale watching, Mick, there were even different whales, which we're going to have in Australia, and with the kangaroos. How did you deal with all the different sorts of groups and areas in Wales? We can't hear you. I'll just ask. Yeah. No, I can't hear you. Nope. I'll let you sort that out, and I'll ask that question to Craig, Mick, just in case it takes a while. Nope. Can
you hear me now?
Yes.
You hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that, everybody. Every as you said, every community has a different approach. One thing that we found successful though was the generic approach, and the generic approach can be one thing that we did do was we created 10 things that you can do to help protect whales, and we're looking forward to drafting that for kangaroos. So there's a generic thing that's across the board, 10 things that we can do to help protect kangaroos, and that, and you take it from there, because it's the generic will lead to your community, if that makes sense. Like, one of the things, we're drafting those 10 things right now, so if people got suggestions, please send them in, because that creates a really broad but really solid way to think about your population of kangaroos. One of them might be, to take a kangaroo presentation to your local school or something like that. So, we're working on that at the moment. But as far as individual species and stuff, that's the exciting part of it, because you create your own flavor, if you like. You create your own community ownership of it, and that's the intention of this program, that you create ownership. And one thing that Macca has taught us, and Uncle Max taught us, permission to protect the kangaroos. And I think that's a beautiful way of looking at it. We want this program to give you permission to protect your local kangaroos.
And I think that, that obviously this is one of the key reasons why we're doing this, is because we want to really turn that focus around, so your whole community starts to protect your kangaroos. We invite you to lead that, lead that charge. But the more you step forward, other people will come in behind you, because maybe you bring people into the community and they take coffee at someone's shop, and that's good for that coffee shop, or they stop and buy a jumper at another shop and they get that, so as it goes on, those tourists bring money into your area. I know that down in the Grampians, where they've had some terrible kangaroo shooting and stuff, to turn that around in that area, so that the kangaroos are really, it's like, they already are part of our local community. How do we look after them? How do we turn our councils around to feeling like they're citizens in our community that need looking after, as they are there, as they inherently are part of our community? So really, that's kind of a key turnaround that we hope that kangaroo watching can bring. I think, Craig, with your initial starting for your 600 kangaroos that were locked into a property going to be shot, the turning around of that, and even your program in Tourism Victoria coming on board with the stewardship program, really starting to offer alternatives. And that's really what we want people to do in the area. Sarah's just suggesting that, the school children can get involved, and you've had homeschoolers already involved, Craig, so that's fantastic.
Yeah, we've had quite a lot of homeschoolers. It's one of the demographics that it's really popular with, is the homeschooling community. Another one, and it's kind of by having people being there at the time we're doing it, is the international tourists and new migrants to Australia. And those people have come here, they love our animals already, and they don't understand it. We've had some really great conversations with some new migrants. There was actually this Iranian family who kind of Iraq, family from Iraq. I think they'd been here a while, maybe 10 years or so, but they kind of stood in the background just listening to what we said. And at the end of it, they actually invited us to come and join them and sit down and share a meal with them. You know, there's some really fantastic opportunities just waiting to happen, really.
Isn't it? So that's a beautiful story. I love that. And people are really interested. I mean, when we made Kangaroo Love Hate Story, the love part's really real too. The hate part's real, but the love part's real. So it's really building on the love part that we're doing, that we're wanting to do. Macca, is the kangaroo the law all over Gondwana, all over Australia, do you think?
Well, the kangaroos have their own law throughout Australia, and Aboriginal people would have observed that. And part of their law is to take care of the kangaroo. So from my understanding, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. In that they're there. They live, the kangaroos are there, they've been there. Yeah.
We help them to be there. That's our law, to take care of them, to protect them, to learn from them. That's law.
By that beautiful listening to and that kind of connecting and sitting, you kind of see all the things that weave into that law with the kangaroos, with the grasses, with the birds, with all the stories that happened around that sitting, that connection. Yeah. Yeah. Shelley's asking, there might be one for you too, Craig, is do you reckon that you can ask people on private land? How do you think that would work in your area, like going to a private land and doing, I mean, if the people are into it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the people who kind of engaged with us early in this was actually a winery owner, and he loves kangaroos, and a lot of the properties around him were shooters, you know, so we've kind of worked with him quite a bit, you know, and helping him protect his kangaroos. So I know that they're kind of up for anything to kind of promote and help kangaroos. Other things, I think, like in Melbourne, you got the Gisborne Golf Course. You've also got Anglesey Golf Course that actually charge people to go and see the kangaroos on their golf courses as well. So, yeah, I definitely would reach out to private landowners and ask if it is an option for them to come out and have a look.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I really like that idea because I think that works well for people. It's 8 o'clock, people, so we're going to end up now. We will try to answer your questions in I'll email you if I can think of good answers for them. But thanks so much for coming tonight, Macca, Craig, Mick. Fantastic to hear from you all. And thanks for sharing your lifelong passion with us and your work. And we look forward to this program continuing and people around the country really jumping on board to Kangaroo Walks and Talks. And thanks so much for listening to us tonight, everyone, and for participating. See you all. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much.
Bye.